The grand dining hall of the Harrington estate sparkled under golden chandeliers, mirrors casting reflections of wealth and prestige. Waiters glided between tables in crisp uniforms, carrying trays of lamb and wine. At the head of the long table sat Victor Harrington, his polished smile gleaming, every strand of dark hair perfectly slicked back. Beside him, his wife Elena Hart nervously smoothed the folds of her soft blue dress, her trembling hands hidden under the table. She had chosen that gown because once, years ago, Victor had said such colors made her glow. But tonight, he had not looked at her once. Victor rose and clinked his glass, commanding the attention of the room. His voice rang with confidence. "Friends, family, partners, welcome. The Harringtons are proud of what we've built together." Polite applause followed, and Victor basked in it. Elena tried to mirror his smile, though inside her chest tightened. For 10 years she had been his loyal wife, cooking, comforting, attending his events, even giving up her career to stand in his shadow. She remembered when he once whispered, "We'll build everything together, Elena. Just you and me." But those days felt like a dream that belonged to someone else. Victor's eyes sharpened, a dangerous glint forming. "Of course," he said with a pause, "not all successes are equal." The laughter and chatter stilled. Elena's stomach sank. She knew that tone too well, mocking, cruel, meant to wound. "We've triumphed in business, risen in society." Victor swirled his wine. "But one success has escaped us. 10 years of marriage, and still no children." A hush swept through the hall. Elena's throat closed as whispers rippled. She leaned toward him, her voice breaking. "Victor, please. Not here." But he pressed on, louder. 10 years, and not a single heir to carry the Harrington name. What kind of wife fails her duty? At the far end, Isabella Voss, younger and radiant in crimson, raised her glass with a smirk. "What a pity," she purred. "All that beauty wasted." A few guests chuckled. Elena's cheeks burned as she whispered again. "We tried, Victor. You know how hard I tried." "Tried?" Victor sneered. "What good is trying when my house is empty? All your doctors, all your treatments, and still, nothing." He slammed his palm against the table. Glasses rattled, gasps rose. "Do you know how humiliating it is to be tied to a barren woman? To hear partners say, 'Victor, so successful, but no heir, what a shame.'" Elena flinched as though struck. Tears blurred her sight. Isabella leaned forward with mock sympathy. "Oh, Victor, you've been patient far too long. A man like you deserves a legacy." "Not," her gaze slid to Elena, "a dead end." Laughter rippled. Elena's chest ached. She whispered, her voice trembling but firm, "I gave you everything. My love, my time, my sacrifices. I even sold my jewelry to fund your ventures. I defended you when they called you reckless. And what did that bring me?" Victor roared. "An empty home. 10 wasted years." The whispers around them sharpened. Poor Victor, chained to a barren wife, worthless woman. Elena's jaw clenched. She refused to cry before them. "I loved you," she whispered. Victor barked a cruel laugh. "Love without legacy is nothing. And you are nothing." The words cut like blades. Around her, smirks and laughter grew louder, Isabella's most piercing of all. Elena's body trembled, but she rose from her seat, her chair scraping across marble. The hall stilled. "If this is what you think of me," she said softly, her voice carrying, "then know this, you have destroyed the last of my dignity tonight." Victor rose, towering over her. "Destroyed? No, Elena. I've freed myself from a barren wife." Isabella clapped slowly, her smile gleaming. "Well said." The crowd erupted in whispers, ready to feast on tomorrow's scandal. Victor Harrington casts off his barren wife. Elena steadied herself, her voice clear despite the tremor. "You will regret this, Victor. Not because of me, but because truth never stays buried forever." His sneer followed her as she turned and walked out, their laughter crashing against her back. Outside, the night air struck her like ice. She collapsed against the stone wall, sobbing where no one could see. The man she gave her life to had discarded her like refuse, and the woman who replaced her gloated in victory. Her whole body shook. "Why wasn't I enough?" she choked. Her hands pressed unconsciously against her stomach, and though her tears burned, a strange flicker stirred within. "If I am barren," she whispered to the stars, "let life prove it. Never him." And with that vow, Elena Hart stepped into the night, carrying nothing but broken dignity, and the seed of a future Victor could never imagine. The morning after Elena left the Harrington mansion, she woke in a rented room above a corner bakery. plaster flaked from the ceiling, the mattress sagged, and the radiator hissed like a tired animal. But it was quiet. No orders barked from down the hall. No eyes measuring her worth. Only the smell of warm bread drifting up through the floorboards, and the echo of Victor's voice, barren. Worthless. 10 years wasted. She stared at the ring on the bedside table, a pale circle of metal that had once felt like a promise. With a breath that trembled, she slipped it into an envelope and wrote a single line, "Return to sender." Then she stood. Breathe. Stand. She repeated it until the room stopped spinning. 2 weeks later she sat across from Dr. Margaret Lewis in a clinic that smelled of antiseptic and rain-damp coats. Dr. Lewis had guided Elena through years of tests, medicines, and hope that thinned like mist. "Elena," the doctor said gently, turning a thick folder toward her. "We need to talk." Elena braced. "I know. I failed." "No," Dr. Lewis replied. "That's not what this says." She slid a report across the desk, numbers, charts, clinical phrases. Elena didn't follow every term, but 2 lines rang clear: normal ovarian function and no evident barrier to conception. "I don't understand," Elena whispered. Dr. Lewis hesitated, then opened another file. "Years ago, Victor took a test as well." She lowered her voice. "I shouldn't show you this, but you deserve the truth." Elena read the heading, Victor Harrington, Andrology Results. The words that followed stunned her: low motility, severe male factor infertility. Her breath hitched. He knew. Dr. Lewis's eyes softened. "For years." Elena's vision blurred with hot, helpless tears. That dinner. The laughter. Isabella's cutting smile. All of it built on a lie he guarded like treasure. "You are not barren," Dr. Lewis said, squeezing her hand. "Do not let his shame define your life." But it already had, whispered in bakeries, echoed in queues, drifting like smoke wherever she walked. That's her. 10 years and no child. Poor man. Elena took a job in a small bookshop, tallying used paperback receipts by day and collapsing on the thin mattress by night. On the worst evenings, she knelt by the narrow bed and let the grief come. Why did I love a man who destroyed me? The ceiling offered no answer. Somewhere inside the silence, defiance stirred. She pulled down her old notebooks, finance scribbles, cash flow models, problem sets from a degree she had left behind. She enrolled in night courses and stacked certificates until they formed a citadel of paper. She cut every unnecessary expense, saving coins in a coffee tin. She took small consulting gigs for mom-and-pop shops, poring over ledgers until numbers lined up and owners could breathe again. Word spread. A baker told a florist told a tailor. Elena saved a cafe from a tax penalty, patched a theater's bleeding budget, and taught a grocer to track margins like a hawk. Confidence returned in increments, a tide creeping back over stones once scoured dry. At a fundraiser in London's West End, she stood near an exit checking a children's charities accounts when a calm voice said, "Excuse me." She looked up into steady grey eyes and a kind smile. "Adrian Cole," he said, offering his hand. "I hear you saved the Kensington Youth Program." "I only adjusted their accounts," Elena murmured. "Adjusted?" Adrian chuckled. "You snatched them from the brink. That isn't bookkeeping, that's triage." He didn't stare at her like a trophy or a problem to be solved. He listened. He asked for her view on impact versus optics. He laughed at his own mistakes. Over months, patience did its slow, patient work. Walls she'd built to keep out humiliation softened, brick by brick. They married quietly, 2 signatures, a few friends, no chandeliers. One morning, a flutter like the brush of a wing. The test turned positive. Elena wept into Adrian's hands. "They said I couldn't," she whispered. "They lied," he said, covering her fingers with his own. "And even if they hadn't, you would still be enough." 9 months later, the wail of a healthy daughter filled a sunlit room. Years brought 3 more children, 2 boys and another girl, laughter where there had once been cold. And with each small voice, the old lie faded, until it was nothing but dust in a long-closed hall. Adrian's house was alive in ways Elena had once thought impossible. Paint-splotched aprons draped over chair backs, tiny socks clinging to radiators, sunlight puddling in playroom corners. Yet domestic joy did not smother her fire, it fueled it. In the hours between school runs and bedtime stories, Elena scaled what she'd built in the margins. She formalized her practice, hired a sharp-eyed assistant named Meena Patel, and registered Heart and Hearth Consulting, equal parts financial triage and long-term mentoring. Her method was patient and relentless. She sat with owners until numbers stopped being monsters and became maps. She taught transparency like a second language. She demanded reserves before renovations. She traded vanity for viability. Clients who listened survived. Clients who trusted her grew. Adrian never tried to captain her ship. He asked how he could help, then kept the seas calm. Introductions when requested, childcare when needed, a steady presence that asked for nothing but the truth. When a magazine profiled her first £1 million turnaround, the headline read, "Elena Hart rescues the local theatre district." She hid the issue under a cereal box, flustered. Adrian framed it and hung it by the back door where only family would see. Impact rippled outward. With Adrian, she launched the Cole a Hart initiative, underwriting scholarships for girls from shelters and grants for businesses led by survivors of intimate degradation. She set up a small foundation that grew faster than she had planned. Mina called it a machine for dignity. Elena preferred quieter words, a hand in the dark. Then the press found the larger story they craved, not just a strategist, not just a philanthropist, but a woman the world had once called barren, now the mother of 4 and patron of thousands. Features multiplied. The Queen of Quiet Strength, how Elena Hart turned shame into stewardship, from bookshop ledgers to boardroom light. She tolerated the cameras because they brought donors, and because girls who had been laughed at needed to see a different ending. In private, she kept the work grounded. She visited after-school programs without warning, asked children what they loved, and kept notes on what needed fixing. She added warm meals to budgets where numbers had left no room for soup. She raised salaries for caregivers who kept showing up without applause. She refused a dozen stages for every one she accepted. Years had swept her far from Victor's orbit, but the world is a bowl with a small rim. Rumors reached her desk. Harrington Capital had grown flashy and over-leveraged. Expansion abroad, debt like brass polish, shiny, thin, deceptive. Elena didn't rejoice. She knew what collapse did to receptionists and warehouse clerks whose names never made the papers. She sent a private message through an intermediary offering pro bono advising for the lower ranks if layoffs came. No fanfare, no name on the letterhead. Then Mina slid a glossy magazine onto Elena's desk one autumn afternoon. "You'll want to see this." The cover screamed, "Elena Hart to attend Victor Harrington's gala." Beneath it, photos of Elena, Adrian, and their 4 children leaving a children's hospital wing opening. Elena traced the headlines with a fingertip. The old ache hovered, but didn't land. "So," she said, a spark steady in her eyes, "it seems the time has come." That evening, she told Adrian. He looked at her for a long moment and nodded, as if he'd been expecting the tide. "We go as ourselves," he said simply. "No performance. No vengeance." "No vengeance," Elena agreed. "Just the truth." She pulled a gold dress from a garment bag, elegant, strong, understated. "For the girls," she said, thinking of the ones who wrote her letters in a careful, hopeful hand. She touched the pendant at her throat, her grandmother's, redeemed from a pawn slip she had once swallowed back tears to sign, and felt the past settle like a stone she could finally set down. Outside, the city glittered. Inside, her home pulsed with ordinary chaos, a lost shoe, a missing ribbon, someone's math worksheet under the dog. Elena kissed foreheads, tied laces, and checked a final slide deck, numbers, outcomes, receipts. She did not need vindication, but she refused to leave the truth defenseless. The invitation glowed on the counter like a dare. Elena smiled, not sharp but sure. "We go as ourselves," she repeated in her mind. The bowl of the world would soon feel very small. Crown Street Hall glittered the way old money likes to pretend time stands still. Crystal chandeliers, linen that murmured when fingers passed over it, a string quartet coaxing nostalgia from polished wood. Victor Harrington worked the room with the old choreography, shaking hands, laughing a beat too loud, selling a future mortgage to a desperate present. Beside him, Isabella Voss gleamed in crimson silk, every smile measured like a blade. Whispers coiled around the bar. "He looks tired. I hear cash is tight. This gala is theatre." Victor caught shards of it and tightened his collar. "Smile wider," Isabella murmured. "They can smell fear." He poured champagne with a trembling hand and told himself he controlled the mirror. Then the MC tapped the mic. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome tonight's honored guests, Adrian Cole and Elena Hart, and their family." The grand doors opened. A hush fell like snowfall. Elena entered on Adrian's arm, their children just behind, 2 boys, 2 girls, poised, curious, radiant in their small formalities. Light gathered itself on Elena's gold dress and stayed there, as if the room had found the person it was meant to recognize. Victor's breath snagged. Isabella's smile fissured. The whispers bloomed at once. She has children. 4. So it was never her. He lied. Victor forced a laugh that sounded like something breaking. Adopted. He spat to no one in particular, for show. But under his cuff, his pulse beat like sirens. Elena's gaze moved across the hall, unhurried, unafraid. For a heartbeat it touched Victor, not with fury but with a quiet, devastating certainty. Then she turned to greet donors, alumni of programs her foundation had saved, shopkeepers whose businesses she'd steadied. Applause rose, uncoached and roaring. The program began. The quartet softened, cameras clicked, and the screens behind the stage came alive with the Cole O'Hart Initiative's work. Scholarships awarded, clinics renovated, youth centers brought from insolvency to surplus. Then came the slides Elena had debated sharing at all. She hadn't come for blood. But truth, she'd decided, must be given its whole voice. A logo flashed, Carter Global Foundation. Then medical scans, date-stamped reports, signatures, certifications. And on one, in clean black letters, Victor Harrington, male infertility assessment, severe motility impairment. A ripple-turned title. People leaned forward, people leaned away. It was him. All those years. He let her carry it. Victor surged to his feet. Forgery, he shouted, voice cracking against marble. The next slide undercut him. Independent clinic confirmations, chain of custody seals, physician attestations. Isabella stared at the screen as if it had reached up and struck her. You told me she was barren, she hissed. You made me sneer at her. Shut up, Victor snapped, sweat bright on his temple. Elena stood at the podium, voice steady. 15 years ago, I was called barren. Tonight, I stand as a mother, a wife, and a leader among many who make this work possible. Truth does not bend to cruelty. It waits, then it speaks. She gestured toward her children in the front row, who sat straighter, pride flushing their faces. Here is my legacy. Applause thundered. Some stood. Others couldn't seem to decide whether to clap or cover their faces. Victor stumbled forward, desperate. Elena, my Elena, please. Adrian rose smoothly to stand beside his wife, one hand resting over hers. Elena's gaze didn't waver. No, Victor, she said, voice like silk over steel. I gave him children. You lost that right the night you called me less than human. Isabella's laugh cut through the din, bitter and bright. Look at you, she said to Victor, her heel already turning. Bankrupt, earless, and kneeling. She was always the crown you couldn't command. She tore her arm from his grip and swept out, doors booming behind her like a verdict. The ovation swelled until it drowned the noise of Victor's gasping protests. Elena did not bask. She bowed her head to the donors, to program directors, to teenagers who had found their way home through a lit doorway someone funded because she asked. Then she stepped down from the stage, family gathering around her like a small constellation, and together they moved through the aisle as the hall rose to meet them. Outside, the night waited. Inside, a lie finally fell silent. Victor collapsed at the edge of the stage, fingers scrabbling against polished stone as if he could climb back into a version of himself that no longer existed. Please, he choked, reaching for the sweep of Elena's dress. One more chance. I'll change. His pleas frayed in the roar of applause that didn't belong to him. Guests watched with the complicated attention people reserve for public reckonings, pity braided with memory. He mocked her here, someone whispered. Called her worthless. Heads shook. A few eyes shone with tears for the woman who had once slipped out of a room like this with her dignity bleeding. Tonight, she did not bleed. Isabella Voss reappeared only long enough to spit her final truth. You made me complicit in your lie, she said, voice cool as winter glass. You turned me into a villain in a story I didn't write. She looked past him to Elena. You were always the better woman. Then Isabella left him for good, crimson silk slicing through the air like a closing curtain. Elena stepped closer, not to gloat, but to finish what had begun years earlier when she whispered to a cold night sky that life, not cruelty, would decide who she was. Her children stood, a son's jaw set, a daughter's chin lifted, the younger two pressing against Adrian's side. Elena's voice carried, tender and unyielding. You stripped me in public of what you could never give me in private, respect. You told the world I was less than whole. But look at me now, 4 children, a husband who loves without counting, and a name that stands because it kneels to those who need help. You did not break me, Victor. She paused, letting the truth settle. You freed me. The hall rose again, applause rolling like surf. Victor's mouth moved, forming apologies that could no longer spend. Guards did not drag him out. Consequences would, in quieter rooms, with colder chairs, boards, banks, papers to sign. Tonight, there was only the simple accounting of a story turning toward light. Elena did not look back as she joined Adrian. He offered his arm as though they were leaving a family wedding. Outside, the marble steps caught the city's glow, and October air cooled the heat in her cheeks. Cameras waited across the street. Elena didn't flinch. She posed only long enough for her children to beam, then waved the press away. This was not a spectacle. This was a benediction. They walked to the cars. Adrian kissed her knuckles. Home, he murmured. Home, she said. The word felt like a harbor that had learned her name. Back at the house, shoes were shed in a familiar pile. Mina texted. The numbers on donations tonight are unbelievable. Also, proud of you. Elena sent a heart back and padded into the kitchen, where a single lamp kept vigil over fruit bowls and homework sheets. She set the pendant she had pawned and reclaimed on the counter and breathed. Later, when the children were tucked into bed, Elena stepped onto the terrace. The city thrummed below, indifferent and intimate at once. She touched her abdomen, a gesture that had begun as grief and now lived as gratitude. You said I was barren, she whispered to the dark, smiling. But the truth crowned me. She thought of the next morning's meetings, budgets for a shelter expansion, an audit for a music program, a conversation with a hospital about family rooms. She thought of girls who would watch a clip from tonight and square their shoulders. She thought of Victor, not with triumph, but with a kind of distant mercy. May he learn the lessons she had bled to learn. That worth is not a ledger you balance with airs and chandeliers. Inside, Adrian's laugh mingled with a child's sleepy question. Elena turned toward it, toward warm lamplight and the clatter of ordinary joy. She closed the terrace door behind her and carried forward what the hall had made undeniable. Truth can wait longer than cruelty can shout. Betrayal can crush, but resilience crowns. And no one, no man, no rumor, gets to name you but you.